In the moments leading up to the televised exchange, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeff had delivered a startling pronouncement, leaving the assembled audience in disbelief. The progressive wing is undermining our party's prospects with their extreme proposals. His words lingered, pretending a brewing storm. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, the ascending political figure from Texas, was scheduled for what was intended to be a polite panel discussion centered on Democratic unity. However, with cameras actively recording and millions observing, her expression hardened with fierce resolve. This was no mere policy debate. It represented her opportunity to directly challenge the established figure who had just dismissed her entire movement. Jeff, with his polished Washington demeanor and institutional support, clearly hadn't anticipated what was about to unfold. Yet, Crockett, armed with verifiable information and unwavering conviction, was prepared to transform this CNN segment into a confrontation that would send ripples throughout the core of Democratic politics. Before we delve into the unfolding drama, please hit that subscribe button and activate the notification bell to ensure you don't miss our latest political deep dives and analyses of Washington's most volatile episodes. The sophisticated CNN studio buzzed with anticipation as the lighting subtly dimmed around the circular table where four prominent Democrats had convened for what was billed as an amiable discussion on party strategy. Hakeem Jeff sat with impeccable posture, his Navy suit flawlessly tailored, his Harvard-honed self-assurance emanating as the definitive voice of Democratic leadership. At 53, he had painstakingly ascended every step of the political hierarchy, from a New York Assembly to House Democratic leader, becoming the presumed successor to Nancy Pelosi's influential legacy. We need a cohesive message that resonates with moderate voters in swing districts. Jeff had been emphasizing his tone deliberate and authoritative. That's how he regained control of the House in November. The other panelists, a former Obama administration staffer and a centrist think tank director, both noticeably deferential to Jeff's stature, nodded in agreement. But then came the statement that ignited the entire exchange. And frankly, Jeff continued, leaning forward with sudden intensity, we must rein in the progressive wing's impractical demands. Their radical policies and confrontational approach are alienating voters we desperately need. The American public isn't ready for what they're advocating. The camera shifted focus to Jasmine Crockett, and the contrast was striking. At 43, the freshman congresswoman from Texas's 30th district embodied everything the establishment both feared and, perhaps paradoxically, required. A former civil rights attorney who had ascended from the Texas state legislature to Congress in merely 2 years, she brought with her an uncompromising dedication to progressive policies and a rapidly expanding social media presence that afforded her an independent platform from party leadership. Crockett's background diverged significantly from the polished trajectory of Ivy League institutions and ingrained political connections. She had served as a public defender in Texas, engaging in the challenging realities of a system she perceived as fundamentally inequitable. Her election to Congress wasn't a foregone conclusion. She had actively campaigned for it, forging a coalition of young voters, people of color, and working-class supporters who believed in her commitment to substantial change. As Jeff's words hung in the air, the gravity of the situation became immediately clear to all observers. This wasn't merely about a policy disagreement. It concerned the very identity and future trajectory of the Democratic Party. Would it embrace the measured, incremental approach favored by establishment figures like Jeff, or the bold, transformative vision championed by progressives like Crockett? The CNN moderator, recognizing a ratings opportunity, promptly turned to Crockett. Congresswoman, it sounds as though Leader Jeff just characterized your faction of the party as a detriment. Your rebuttal? The split screen displayed Jeff's confident grin, a seasoned politician clearly convinced he could effortlessly manage this freshman's response, juxtaposed with Crockett's unwavering gaze. But what Jeff didn't realize was that Crockett had arrived fully prepared. Unlike many progressives before her who had been caught off guard by establishment critiques, she had anticipated this moment and came armed with more than just righteous indignation. "Thank you for that question," Crockett began, her voice calm but imbued with an unmistakable sharpness. And thank you, Leader Jeff, for finally articulating aloud what many in leadership have only murmured behind closed doors. The audience could sense it. This would not be a typical political evasion. Crockett was about to bring the fight directly to the second most powerful Democrat in the House, live on national television. "Allow me to be perfectly clear," Crockett continued, turning to face Jeff directly. "When you label our policies radical, what precisely are you referring to? Universal health care, which every other developed nation already possesses. A living wage, so working individuals don't require 3 jobs to subsist. Climate action, so our planet remains habitable." The moderator, sensing the escalating tension, attempted to interject, but Crockett raised her hand. "No, I would genuinely appreciate Leader Jeff explaining which of these radical policies are supposedly deterring voters, because the polling data indicates an entirely different narrative." Jeff maintained his composure, his practiced smile unwavering as he leaned toward his microphone. "Congresswoman, I believe you are mischaracterizing my point. We all desire progress, but we need to be strategic." "Your approach?" "My approach," Crockett interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "Let's discuss approaches, Leader Jeff. In the last election cycle, progressive candidates outperformed establishment Democrats in swing districts by an average of 5 points. That's not my opinion. That's data from the DNC's own internal analysis." The camera captured Jeff's momentary flicker of discomfort, a crack in his polished facade. He hadn't expected her to arrive armed with the party's own statistics. "That analysis is incomplete and doesn't account for—" He began, but Crockett was ready. "I have the full report right here," she declared, holding up her tablet. "Would you like me to share the specific findings about which messages actually resonated with voters in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin?" The CNN moderator, recognizing the unfolding goldmine, interjected, "This appears to be a fundamental disagreement about the party's direction." "Leader Jeff, how do you respond to the Congresswoman's data?" Jeff shifted in his seat, his body language betraying the initial signs of unease. "Look, selective statistics don't tell the whole story. The party needs a broad coalition, and extreme rhetoric from the progressive wing makes building that coalition harder." "Extreme rhetoric?" Crockett repeated, her eyes narrowing. "Let's discuss what's extreme. Is it extreme to highlight that 3 Americans possess more wealth than the bottom 50% combined? Is it extreme to observe that we are the sole wealthy nation where individuals go bankrupt from medical expenses?" She then addressed the camera directly. "What's truly extreme is witnessing party leadership dilute every bold proposal until it's barely recognizable, then feign surprise when voters feel as though nothing ever changes." The other panelists attempted to interject with more measured perspectives, but the dynamic had fundamentally shifted. This was now unmistakably a confrontation between Jeff and Crockett, establishment versus progressives, playing out in real time. Jeff attempted to regain control of the narrative. "The American people elected Joe Biden because they desired steady, responsible leadership, not revolution. Our responsibility is to deliver practical solutions, not unrealistic promises." "With all due respect, Leader Jeff," Crockett countered, her voice now carrying a sharp edge, "the American people elected Joe Biden because they were terrified of the alternative. And they're growing weary of being told that basic human dignity is unrealistic. Other countries provide health care to all their citizens. Other democracies have living wages and paid family leave. Yet somehow, we're supposed to believe that the richest nation in human history cannot afford these basics." The tension in the studio was palpable. Backstage, CNN producers communicated frantically through earpieces. No one wanted to cut to commercial during what was clearly becoming a viral moment. Jeff, a seasoned debater, attempted to pivot. "We share the same objectives, Congresswoman. We simply differ on tactics." "Do we share the same objectives?" Crockett retorted. "Because from my vantage point, it appears leadership is more committed to appeasing donors than delivering for voters." A collective gasp rippled through the studio audience. This was the kind of accusation typically reserved for private conversations, not national television. "That is a serious accusation," Jeff replied, his tone hardening. "And frankly, it's the kind of divisive rhetoric that harms our party." "What harms our party," Crockett countered, "is promising change but never delivering it. What harms our party is telling young people, working people, and communities of color to wait their turn again and again." The producer's voice came through the moderator's earpiece. "This is ratings gold. Let them continue." "It seems we've struck a nerve," the moderator observed. "Congresswoman Crockett, you've essentially accused Leader Jeff and the establishment of prioritizing donor interests over voter needs. Do you have anything to substantiate that?" The camera zoomed in on Crockett's face as she reached for her tablet once more. Jeff's expression flickered with the first hint of genuine concern. "I'm glad you asked," Crockett said, her voice steady as she brought up a document. "Because I believe the American people deserve to know exactly whose interests are truly being represented in Washington." "Let's discuss pharmaceutical prices," Crockett stated, her eyes still fixed on her tablet. 2 years ago, when we had a bill to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices, something 92% of Americans support, it mysteriously got watered down at the last minute. She looked up directly at Jeff. "Leader Jeff, you led the charge to remove insulin price caps from that bill. Coincidentally, in the previous quarter, you received $218,000 from pharmaceutical PACs." The studio fell silent. Jeff's composed facade cracked slightly as he adjusted his tie. "Those contribution numbers are public record, but that characterization is completely—" "Public record indeed," Crockett interrupted, turning her tablet toward the camera. The screen displayed a graphic with donation figures highlighted in red. "In fact, I've compiled the donation record for the last 5 major progressive bills that leadership mysteriously couldn't get past. Would you like to see the correlation between donations and voting patterns?" The CNN cheering at the bottom of the screen swiftly updated. "Crockett confronts Jeff with donation records live on air." "This is a gross misrepresentation," Jeff responded, his voice rising slightly. "Campaign finance is complex, and suggesting that donations influence policy decisions is what?" Crockett pressed. "Accurate? Because the American people aren't foolish, Leader Jeff. They can discern the connection between who funds campaigns and which policies advance or die." She swiped on her tablet again. "Let's discuss the climate provisions that were stripped from the infrastructure bill. You personally assured progressive members that those provisions would be included in subsequent legislation. 2 years later, we're still waiting, while you've received over $300,000 from energy companies opposed to those exact provisions." The moderator, recognizing the explosive nature of the moment, attempted to interject some balance. "Leader Jeff, how do you respond to these specific allegations?" Jeff straightened his jacket, buying himself a moment to compose his response. "Congresswoman Crockett is new to Washington. She doesn't comprehend how complex legislative negotiations are. We fight for every inch of progress we can achieve." "I may be new to Washington," Crockett replied, her voice now resonating with controlled anger, "but I'm not new to recognizing when someone is avoiding the question. The American people deserve straightforward answers." She turned toward the audience. "Leader Jeff wants you to believe that progressives are the problem because we actually try to deliver what we promise. He calls our policies radical, but what's truly radical is accepting a system where millions cannot afford health care, where working full-time doesn't cover the bills, where we watch our planet burn while politicians accept checks from the corporations causing the damage." The focus of the cameras shifted back and forth between Crockett's impassioned delivery and Jeff's increasingly uncomfortable expression. "What the establishment fears isn't that our policies will fail," Crockett continued. "They fear that our policies will succeed and disrupt the comfortable arrangement they have with their donors." Then came the moment that would be replayed on news programs, shared across social media, and debated in political circles for weeks to come. Crockett pulled up another document on her tablet and slid it across the table to Jeff. This is your voting record on progressive priorities compared to your public statements supporting those same priorities, she said calmly. 27 times in the past 3 years, you've publicly endorsed policies that you then helped kill behind closed doors. The camera zoomed in on the document, and the damning evidence was clear for millions of viewers to see. Side by side were Jeff's public statements supporting progressive policies and the procedural moves he'd made to undermine those same policies. That's a selective and misleading presentation, Jeff stammered, visibly unsettled for the first time. Is it? Crockett asked, her confidence growing as she sensed the momentum shifting definitively in her favor. Because I have the receipts for every single instance. Shall we go through them one by one? Without waiting for an answer, she continued, March 15th last year, you told CNN you strongly support a $15 minimum wage. That same week, you worked with moderates to attach poison pill amendments that you knew would sink the bill. Jeff reached for his water glass, buying time. The tremor in his hand didn't escape the cameras. June 22nd, you publicly backed stronger voting rights protections while simultaneously working to weaken the enforcement mechanisms in the actual legislation. Jeff attempted to interrupt, but Crockett was on a roll, her voice rising with righteous indignation. September 8th, you stood at a press conference declaring climate change the existential crisis of our time. Your words, while your staff was literally drafting weakened emission standards at the request of donors from the fossil fuel industry. The other panelists sat in stunned silence. The moderator, recognizing historic television unfolding before him, didn't dare interrupt. This isn't about progressive versus moderate, Crockett declared, addressing the viewers directly. It's about honesty versus hypocrisy. It's about whether we actually fight for the people who elected us or just pretend to while serving other interests. She turned back to Jeff, her voice softening slightly but losing none of its power. Leader Jeff, the American people are struggling. They're drowning in medical debt, working multiple jobs to make rent, watching opportunities slip away from their children. They don't need politicians who tell them change is impossible. They need champions who fight for them as hard as you're currently fighting for your donors. The silence that followed was deafening. Jeff looked genuinely shaken, his usual eloquence abandoning him as he fumbled for a response. I have always worked for what I believe is in the best interest of the American people and our party, he finally managed. I believe you think that's true, Crockett replied, her tone now almost sympathetic. But the evidence tells a different story. And it's time for the Democratic Party to decide. Do we want to be the party that fights for working people or the party that just claims to while protecting the status quo? She gestured toward the tablet still sitting in front of Jeff. The receipts don't lie, leader, and the American people deserve better than what they've been getting. The CNN producer's voice crackled urgently in the moderator's ear. This is going viral. Every network is picking it up. Don't go to commercial, no matter what. The moderator nodded almost imperceptibly and turned to Jeff. Leader, would you like to address these specific discrepancies that Congresswoman Crockett has highlighted? Jeff, a skilled politician who had navigated countless difficult interviews, found himself in uncharted territory. His usual arsenal of deflections and pivots would only dig him deeper into the hole Crockett had created with her meticulous receipts. What matters is moving forward, he attempted, trying to regain his footing. Internal party disagreements don't serve. With respect, Crockett interrupted. The American people don't want to move forward from accountability. They want leaders who say what they mean and mean what they say. The game had changed. In less than 15 minutes, Jasmine Crockett had done what few progressives had managed before, caught the establishment in its contradictions with irrefutable evidence, live on national television, leaving one of the party's most powerful figures struggling for words. Within minutes of the segment ending, the confrontation between Crockett and Jeff exploded across social media. Crockett receipts began trending nationwide, with clips of her most devastating moments being shared millions of times. The segment where she slid her tablet across to Jeff, quickly dubbed the receipt drop, became an instant meme, with people using the image to represent calling out hypocrisy in all contexts. Progressive media outlets immediately declared it a watershed moment. Crockett just changed how progressives fight back. Read the headline on the Young Turks. Establishment caught red-handed. Crockett brings receipts, declared Common Dreams. Even mainstream outlets couldn't ignore the significance, with CNN's own post-show analysis calling it the most consequential internal Democratic confrontation since AOC arrived in Congress. Conservative media, sensing blood in the water, amplified the conflict with gleeful headlines about Democratic civil war. Fox News ran with Dem leadership exposed. Crockett reveals party's empty promises. But even their commentators had to acknowledge Crockett's effectiveness, with one reluctantly admitting, love her policies or hate them. She came prepared, and she didn't blink. Twitter, now X, was ablaze with reactions. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted, "This is how it's done. Bring the receipts, always." At Jasmine Crockett TX, showing us all how accountability works. Bernie Sanders shared the clip with a simple message. The status quo is getting nervous. Good. Even some moderates found themselves impressed by Crockett's preparation and delivery. Regardless of where you stand on the policies, the gap between public statements and private actions is a legitimate issue, tweeted a centrist Democratic strategist. By evening, the clip had reached over 50 million views across platforms. Morning shows were already booking guests to discuss the fallout. Political analysts scrambled to understand what this meant for Democratic Party dynamics. Behind the scenes, the response was even more dramatic. Progressive members of Congress flooded Crockett's office with calls of support and congratulations. Several who had previously been hesitant to challenge leadership publicly were reportedly reconsidering their approach. Jasmine showed us that with the right preparation, we can win these fights, one anonymous House progressive told Politico. The leadership's two-faced approach only works when it happens in the shadows. Democratic voters responded with an outpouring of support for Crockett. Her campaign email list grew by 200,000 in a single day. Small dollar donations flooded in, with her campaign reporting over $3 million raised in the 24 hours following the confrontation, mostly in small amounts averaging $23. Jeff's team scrambled to control the damage. His spokesperson released a statement calling for Democratic unity and expressing disappointment in attempts to divide our party when we should be focusing on defeating Republicans. But the statement notably failed to address any of the specific contradictions Crockett had highlighted. Several House Democrats loyal to leadership attempted to downplay the confrontation, with one telling reporters off the record, "This kind of public fighting only helps Republicans." But their attempts to dismiss Crockett's concerns only amplified the story, with progressives pointing out that concerns about helping Republicans only ever seemed to emerge when establishment figures were being held accountable. 3 days after the confrontation, the political landscape had visibly shifted. Jeff called an emergency meeting with the Progressive Caucus, reportedly seeking to address tensions and find common ground. Sources inside the meeting described it as tense but productive, with progressives bringing specific policy demands that had previously been ignored. The dynamics have changed, one Progressive Caucus member told the Washington Post. Before Crockett's confrontation, leadership could dismiss us with vague promises. Now, they know we're keeping receipts, and we're not afraid to use them. Policy positions began shifting almost immediately. A prescription drug pricing bill that had been stalled for months suddenly found new life, with stronger provisions than the original proposal. Climate legislation that had been deemed too ambitious was now being reconsidered. Several centrist Democrats who had previously opposed a $15 minimum wage announced they were reconsidering their position in light of new economic data. For everyday Americans watching the fallout, the impact was profound. Comment sections across news sites filled with variations of the same sentiment. Finally, someone said it. Many expressed a renewed hope that maybe, just maybe, politics could actually deliver meaningful change if more elected officials followed Crockett's example of holding power accountable. Political science professors and media analysts began dissecting the confrontation as a case study in effective political communication. What made Crockett's approach so devastating wasn't just that she challenged leadership, explained a communication expert on MSNBC. It's that she came with irrefutable evidence, presented clearly and directly. She didn't rely on rhetoric, she brought receipts. 2 weeks after the confrontation, polling showed a significant shift in how Democratic voters viewed party dynamics. Support for progressive policies had increased by 12 points, while trust in establishment leadership had declined by similar margins. More importantly, enthusiasm among young voters and traditionally marginalized communities, groups essential for Democratic victories, had surged dramatically. The long-term implications remained to be seen, but one thing was clear. Jasmine Crockett had fundamentally altered the power dynamics within the Democratic Party. By exposing the gap between public promises and private actions with concrete evidence, she had created a template for accountability that couldn't easily be dismissed or ignored. This isn't just about one confrontation or one news cycle, Crockett told supporters at a rally the following weekend. It's about demanding that our leaders actually fight for the people they claim to represent. The American people deserve champions who don't just talk about change, but deliver it. As the dust settled and Washington adjusted to the new reality, political observers across the spectrum agreed on one thing. The rules of engagement had changed. Crockett had raised the bar for political authenticity and accountability, and there was no going back. In politics, there are moments that define eras, wrote a veteran political columnist. Jasmine Crockett bringing receipts to Hakeem Jeffries may well be remembered as the moment the progressive movement truly found its voice, not just in passion, but in power. Thanks for watching our breakdown of Jasmine Crockett's explosive confrontation with Hakeem Jeffries. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe for more political analysis that cuts through the noise. Hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest videos on Washington's biggest power struggles and most dramatic moments. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Crockett's approach will change how progressives challenge the establishment? See you in the next video.